What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're studying the book of Ruth, which is one of the only books that we cover in one day here, but it's so awesome because as we see all the sin and the judgment of the book of Judges, we see all of the good, righteous behavior and the righteous blessings that God gives in the book of Ruth. So Ruth totally stands out from Judges, even though it happened at the same time. Which really answers our question, was there anyone in the time of the Judges that was obeying God, serving God? Was anybody doing life God's way? And the answer is yes, some people were. And an unlikely hero shows up in the book of Ruth. Ruth is actually not an Israelite. She marries an Israelite, but she's actually from the land of Moab. So again, this is another thing that shows in the Old Testament that the reason God said not to marry other people was not because they were from some other tribe. It was really because most of these other people did not serve God. Ruth, on the other hand, actually is the most faithful person to God in this entire book, even though she's not a born Israelite. She's a Moabite. She enters the land of Israel, and she really enters all their cultures and customs and even their religious practices because she trusts and serves God, and she married in. So we see her in chapter 1 because her husband dies. Naomi is the other main character here. Naomi has a husband named Elimelech. They have two sons. Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law. So Ruth marries one of Naomi's sons. All three of those men die as they live in the land of Moab. They go back into the land, and when they do, one of them stays behind, one of them goes. Ruth says to Naomi, you know what, I'm going to stick with you for good. In chapter 16 and 17, we see this awesome declaration where Ruth says, your God is going to be my God. Wherever you end up and you live and you die, that's where I'm going to live and that's where I'm going to die because I'm sticking with you. And that good reputation actually preceded her as she went into the land because in chapter 2, when she's working in the fields, a guy named Boaz, who owns one of these fields, he actually knows who Ruth is based on her reputation. And he says, you have a great reputation. You are known as a noble and godly woman. Here, you want to be with our people. Stick with my servants. Work with them because you're a godly person. And Boaz recognizes that. Now, Ruth comes home, tells Naomi this story, and Naomi says, ooh, that guy, you know what? He'd be a great guy to find as a husband because he's an awesome husband, I bet. So let's get you to try to marry him. So they put together this plan at the beginning of chapter 3 where Naomi tells Ruth, you should probably put some makeup on. Look at it. It's right here in chapter 3, verse 3. It says, wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. He says, look, you might not have looked so good when you were working in the fields before. Why don't you wash your face? Why don't you put some olive oil or whatever they put on to make themselves look pretty, right? Their makeup. Put that on and see if you can get him to want to be your husband. Because he is actually a redeemer. And the way that worked, that's a big theme in this book, that if you had a person in your family die and they didn't have kids and they didn't have a line to pass their land on to for an inheritance, if you didn't have that, what they were supposed to do was someone near them was supposed to take care of their family members and gain that inheritance for themselves and give that inheritance to the people in their family. So it's supposed to stay within the family. They weren't supposed to sell their land, like let's say to the Philistines or to the Ammonites or to the Moabites. They weren't supposed to do that. So Boaz was one of the people in line who could have married Ruth. So Naomi knows that, hatches a plot, and I actually don't think this plot is a very good plot. I think Naomi is trying to trick Boaz into doing something he shouldn't here, but Ruth makes sure that he doesn't do anything wrong and that she doesn't do anything wrong, and they have this conversation, and Boaz says, thank you so much for doing this the right way. Thank you for not trying to make me sin. Thank you also for showing me this great kindness and wanting to marry me. Like, that's crazy. You want to marry me, not some other rich young man or some poor young man. Like, you can marry a young man, you can marry all those people, but you want to marry me. That's an awesome kindness. So if I can marry you, I'm going to marry you. And in chapter 4, we see how this all works out, where Boaz redeems Ruth, basically talking to one person who's closer in line to redeem her. And he initially wants to redeem the land, but once he finds out, hey, there's also this girl named Ruth who's a Moabite, and you got to marry her, this guy says, I can't do that because if I do that, my inheritance will be split and my kids won't get the same inheritance, so I can't do that. So Boaz, why don't you redeem this land and also redeem Ruth? And that's exactly what happens. And basically, it's a happily ever after story, but there's something built in this story that maybe you didn't know before. At the end of this book, it says that Ruth gave birth to a son named Obed. And it said Obed was this great blessing to Naomi because Naomi was so sad before, and now she's so happy because she's got this grandson, this grandbaby boy. And it says next that Obed grew up and he had a son named Jesse. And Jesse grew up and had a son named David. So I think this shows us one of the reasons why God included this book in our Bibles. What God is doing and what the author of Ruth is doing is showing David's lineage, showing David's line. That David, the king, the most important king that we're going to meet in the book of 1 Samuel as we continue reading the Bible, we're going to meet him as a king, but also we're going to see that he has a royal, a righteous, a godly lineage of parents. That if you step it all back from David, back to Jesse, back to Obed, you've got some important parents, some righteous parents named Ruth and Boaz. And we see his family tree. And I think it's so awesome to see how the whole Bible really fits together like that. And that's why this is included. And I think that's why God wanted this to be here. To show David's family, but also to show that Ruth is a righteous woman. And Ruth is an awesome example of a person that you, especially if you're a lady, you want to be like Ruth. But even us guys, we want to be faithful to our friends. We want to be righteous in our behavior. So important to be like Ruth. So that's our Old Testament reading today. In the New Testament, we're reading Luke chapter 11. We're continuing this. There's a lot here. I think the most notable part is verses 37 to verse 54, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and the lawyers. And it says the Pharisees, they were the ones who, as you probably have already known, they know the law, they teach the law, they're like the religious leaders, they're kind of the pastors, so to speak, of that time period in the Judaistic system. But then you've got the lawyers. And Jesus is first confronting the Pharisees about how they teach but they don't practice. And the lawyers say, wait a minute, if you're insulting them, I think you're also insulting us. And the lawyers were not like lawyers today who, they stand and they fight a case, they know the law, and they fight for the law or sometimes against the law in court. But that's not these type of lawyers. These type of lawyers were the people who knew the law of Moses. So they were the keepers of God's law. And it says that they were not actually righteous in their activities. So Jesus says, you guys are cursed too because you know the law and you teach the law, but you don't do the law. And I think the big thing here is Jesus wants people to be consistent. He wants us to be unhypocritical. And that should be a helpful lesson to us, that he wants us to know the Bible, to teach the Bible, and to do the Bible. These people, all they did was know the Bible and teach the Bible. And without doing the Bible, that made them hypocritical. And really, you can't even do the Bible till you know the Bible. And also, there's an in-between part there that the lawyers and the Pharisees did, and that was teach the Bible. So I think sometimes people look at this and say, yeah, man, that's why we should never teach the Bible or help others understand the Bible. That is not what Jesus is getting at. He's just getting at, if you're helping people get the Bible, but you're not getting the Bible yourself, that's hypocritical. Which hopefully that's a helpful reminder to you if you are a person who's helpfully explaining the Bible to others, you're a good participant in your small group, you're a person who's trying to evangelize people. Just know that if you're doing all those good things, make sure that you're a person who's also in your own personal life keeping God's word and caring about it for yourself. So that's a helpful reminder for all of us right there. So that's our daily Bible reading today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.